As reports of coronavirus have spread across the U.S., so have incidents of anti-Asian violence.
This has now led some to worry about how to defend themselves, and gun sales are actually up in certain neighborhoods.
Restaurants and other businesses in cities from New York to California have reported big drops in sales. We're also learning about reports of racist incidents at hotels and bullying of Asian American students.
It's not just in the U.S. Asians around the world have reported discrimination linked to coronavirus.
I would say the customers that I work with are a lot more paranoid. I'd greet someone and they'd be like, oh, like I'm still looking, but they're not actually looking. They're just kind of like stalling, and they're looking for like my coworker to be done with their order so that like my coworker can take their order instead of me. So that happened like a couple times, and that was kind of weird. It was uncomfortable, and also just seeing kind of the hypocrisy within the hysteria, in terms of just like white people, for the most part, like they'll look at me a lot, but then they'll like cough into their hand, and then they want to pay with their credit card that they coughed into, and I'm just like, oh my god, if I like sniffed, you'd be all over me right now. But it's fine for you to cough and then hand me your credit card.
A lot of times before I was quarantined, I knew I was gonna cough or I was gonna sneeze, and I would kind of like have to hold it back because like I didn't want to make anyone else in the room feel uncomfortable or scared, you know. And especially because now that the temperature and global warming is coming up, definitely spring is speeding up faster than it usually is, and allergies are coming up. That's what worries me the most, that like a lot of Asians also have allergies and stuff like that, and that they're gonna have to be so like cautious of themselves just because they have allergies, you know.
One time where I went to this big traditional event that they do every year called Carnival. Me and 3 of my other girlfriends, they were all white. So this one Spanish girl came into this restaurant that we were eating in. The first thing she says is, in Spanish, look at my costume, like I'm the coronavirus, like, and she said it in a way that as if I'm like a part of her costume, or as if I'm supposed to understand the joke, especially probably because I'm Asian. You know, she wasn't being hateful, but I just think like a joke like that adds to like the stigma that Asians are getting.
Like I understand that sometimes humor is a way for people to cope with situations, but some of the jokes just like aren't funny. Like specifically the ones that place the blame on like Asians and like stigmatize them and have them view as being the cause of like the virus, and just not taking the virus like seriously as it should.
People on Twitter, like certain racist people, they would post like, oh, like I ordered Chinese food but then I didn't pick up when he came to deliver because I was scared of the coronavirus. And like as an Asian American myself, like I've noticed a lot of my friends' family restaurant has been like shut down for a while because business isn't running, and it worries me a lot.
If a joke hurts someone, you should like retract it, apologize, you know. And I just find that like really rude, because in a time like this we should all be sticking together, but instead like some people are just like, their racism again is like showing even more prominent during these times.
One of my friends was approached by a police officer. This was actually a really good thing. Approached by a police officer because she was working alone, saying, hey, I know with what things are going on right now, like if you need me, I have like, I'll support you. And which is not what I normally think that a police officer would do in this situation. So that was really comforting that a lot of people are seeing the other side of it, which is that it's unfair to blame Asian Americans, specifically Chinese Americans, for something that they had no hand in. Like, no one asked for this. It's affecting everyone equally, and yet it's being labeled as something that started, that Chinese people actively started, and that's so dumb. That is so othering.
It's just a lot of these things, like the virus itself, the physical virus itself, versus with like the virus of like people discriminating and xenophobia and all these crazy stuff, and Asians are being discriminated in different corners around the world for wearing masks or, you know, being thought of creating this virus.
It's not that the coronavirus is like that kills people, but it's just that it brings out the ugliest in human forms, where I feel like they're racist, the blame game like existing all at once, so like they just want to attack a certain group to put it to a blame quickly.
I mean, it's just awful. It just shows what people really think about like other people, and I feel like they think that this is a opportunity to like bring out the hatred just because they think that certain people caused the virus and they deserve this hate, so it's acceptable for them to, you know, spew out their like innermost hatred towards like Chinese people or Asian looking people.
It's just depressing and very sad, especially to see like, you know, because I am Asian American, and like you're also like the identity kind of thing, like you're Asian and you're also American technically, but it seems like ever since the COVID-19 has come out, it's like you're seen as just Asian to the rest of these like Americans, you know. They're like, they look at you a little bit weird.
I've had a lot of friends who are Asian American suffer from the brunt end of racism, being told to go back to China. It isn't good mental health wise to see all of these stories of Asian Americans being brutalized, and then hearing online that people are tweeting certain things, like and seeing our president call it the Chinese virus, which then allows a lot of people, it opens the door for a lot of people to follow in that pattern, in that mindset.
And as a leader of a national country, he really should be able to calm people down instead of just saying what's on his mind. He knows the population is composed of Asian nationality, so as a leader himself, he should not be blaming it, because he basically puts the blame on the Asian community, and as the generation hears that from the government and from the leader of our country, they're going to follow.
I just wish that like people like stop hating each other about that. You know, like even like nowadays government is like saying how it all started from this government, that government, it started from this specific group of people. That people are like, they don't trust each other, and then they're just hating. And then I feel like nowadays like those like social hatred is like bigger virus than the actual coronavirus.
A person at the White House used the term Kung Flu. My question is, do you think that's wrong, Kung Flu? And do you think using the term Chinese virus, that puts Asian Americans at risk, that people might target that?
No, not at all. I think they probably would agree with it 100%. It comes from China.
The coronavirus's origin in China has caused a backlash against Asian Americans in the first 2 months since the first positive diagnosis here. From schoolyards to trips to the grocery store, some Asian Americans have reported verbal and physical attacks, and the FBI has warned of a potential surge in hate crimes still to come.
I have great love for all of the people from our country, but as you know, China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now, that it was caused by American soldiers. That can't happen. It's not going to happen, not as long as I'm president. It comes from China.
It is clear that Asian Americans are facing discrimination over a disease that does not discriminate. The CDC says Asians are not more likely to contract or spread coronavirus than anyone else. Politicians are now working to combat racism, but one restaurant owner we spoke to said the damage is done.
My initial thoughts were on like the curiosity behind why it seemed extremely racialized. In the beginning, because also I think around my social circles, they also talked about the previous pandemics or virus outbreaks before, and it didn't seem to be as racialized as it is now.
At this point, it's like you can't really blame who caused it or not.
It's like we gotta figure out how to fix this, and then people are still blaming, oh, it all started because of this part of people or this part of people. It's like, dude, like we're way beyond that point. They're talking about like, oh yeah, it's just freaking blurb kind of people that like made this worse. A freaking government just ruined everything. It was like, I mean, does that matter at this point? Like, we all gotta stay safe at the end.
I've actually had a number of conversations today about how that is just so symptomatic of this larger push to just find scapegoats for, right, and like blame those people who look like that are not us, and just not take responsibility for your own actions or things. Like, it's so deeply entrenched, right? This habit of right-wing sort of politics and discourse to blame it on the other and to create the category of the other, and to sort of consolidate all negativity in that other.
I've realized that there are kind of two roads of thought from Asian Americans who do realize that this is affecting, that even though the racism that we experience is different, it still affects us in certain ways, like being the mono minority, people thinking that we are better than we are and therefore holding us to a higher standard. There are things that are subtle but still very harmful, and then slowly but surely realizing that we have always been othered and always been like kind of grouped together into this one label, which is Asian American, to which it doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, you're still going to be told to go back to China. There's another group of Asian Americans who have kind of clung to this idea of the American dream. And those are like some Asian Americans who consider themselves to be Trump supporters and kind of align themselves with this like neoliberal slash like authoritarian, like Republican, conservative, whatever label you have for it. They will still align themselves with this view because they think of themselves as part of the in crowd, when in fact that is so far from the case, that they are seen as so other that it is kind of astounding that it doesn't kind of penetrate their like worldview, that even though you have strived for this American dream your whole life, you moved maybe across the world to get here, to have the opportunities for your children, that should be enough, but it isn't, and you will still be seen as that other. And it's really painful to encounter people who have that kind of ignorance in them, because you know that you are in the same playing field when it comes to the racism that you can experience.
In my social class, we've learned that Asian Americans tend to be less impoverished, more successful, and the fact that a lot of us don't speak up for other races, and hopefully the xenophobia against us right now is a wake-up call for people who have been who have turned a blind eye to racism. Hopefully they'll realize that in order to even begin to fight the problem, that we need to realize it is a problem, that even though that it may not affect us now, it will affect us, it will affect other people, and we need to be more compassionate towards other people to fix it.
A lot of more people who aren't very aware of this, like say they grew up in a very predominantly Asian, I would say Asian like community, they wouldn't really, face racism in a sense, right? But now they're exposed to this and they see this happening, and then I guess my opinion is that people will be aware of it, but people who are already not affected by the racism won't think much about it, but they'll have like, it'll be in the back of their head, right? But people who are, you know, affected by it and like they're very outspoken about it, you know, if anything, it just like spark more rage in them. And then that's kind of my mindset of it. But at least on the bright side, I guess on the bright side is like now people are aware of it, you know.
I've seen so many people just videos or comments, thoughts about just why are Asian Americans like complaining about racism right now and comparing it to other types of racism. And to me, it's just like you need to have like compassion and empathy for everyone, no matter what your situation is. If something's wrong, it's wrong, you know. And so it's not something to compare. Now this is what's happening right now, and so you need to be understanding of how everyone's feeling.
There's one point that I always like making, which is in the 1960s, when the civil rights movement was starting to get on its feet, there were certain articles that were released saying that post-World War II, Chinese and Japanese Americans were doing just fine. And to be aligned in a way that kind of puts you on a hierarchy of how you're valued in American society, it's almost a trick to then pit people of color against each other. And this is something that has continued on and on to current day. But the trick is that being pitted against each other is just a ploy so that we are blind to the bigger workings of what's happening, which is corporate greed and the prison industrial complex and things that are happening so that money is kept out of our pockets and in the pockets of large corporations and billionaires.
I saw a tweet, I forgot what his name was, I feel so bad, but it was an Asian person who was kind of calling in Asians in general, saying, hey, you see how lately people probably have been treating you with like suspicion or fear, just saying that this is something that like darker skinned people have to deal with every day. I think that was also like an oh kind of moment to me. Like I didn't even think about that. And I'm really glad to have seen it and that someone said something about it. Just because like being a light-skinned East Asian, it's like that's the amount of privilege that I have, that like even if I do care, I don't even realize certain things unless they're explicitly like told to me. So I'm glad that that point was made. I guess I'm not quite sure how to move on from there, except to just like be even more aware and understanding and just like combating in a more educated way the microaggressions that people faced like moving forward, the microaggressions that darker skinned people face moving forward.
I definitely think that our view as Asians on racism has definitely changed tremendously, because it's almost like now we know how it feels to be, you know, in that other side. Because usually, like, yeah, like when you're growing up, people make fun of like, oh, you're Chinese, like, oh, Jackie Chan's your dad. But like, because Asians have always been like the quiet bystander in all that racial like protests and everything like that, we never really speak up, and we've been criticized about that. I think that now that we're in the situation, like how like Black people have been made fun of for Ebola and stuff like that, I feel like now as like Asians, we've definitely like come to understanding more of their point of view and their side. And I just hope that part of this, even though this is really bad, I just hope that this will progress us to like, you know, stand up for other races and like protest and participate more. The racism will still stand even if the virus is not here.
I hope that this ends up bringing us closer together rather than further apart, because there's so much potential for both, like we've been talking about with finding scapegoats and fear and hate, how that really has a lot of potential to break people apart. And at the same time, there's so much potential for us to come together and see past our differences, see each other's shared humanity, and like celebrate that and uphold that, and support each other as we figure it out, like a day at a time.